The impact of tariffs on CIO decision-making. President Trump is expected to announce new semiconductor tariffs this week within days of announcing tariff exemptions for PCs, laptops, smartphones, memory chips, and flat panel displays. The policy uncertainty has forced major enterprises into what Sanchit Gogia, chief analyst and CEO at Greyhound Research, calls a procurement holding pattern. Tariff volatility has turned routine technology procurement into a geopolitical chess game, said Gogia. In one striking example documented by Greyhound, a Fortune 100 insurance provider CIO pulled back a $15 million data center rollout just days before execution after legal and risk teams flagged the potential for mid-project tariff changes that would render imported server equipment prohibitively expensive. This impact varies across tech sectors. Different sectors, different strategies, Gogia noted. IT hardware firms are relocating factories, AI vendors are locking in chip bundles, and software firms are rewriting contracts. Reshoring U.S. semiconductor fabs is politically compelling, but operationally incomplete, Gogia argued, as quoted in ComputerWorld.com. Additional comments by Greyhound Research Analyst. Trump's tariff flip-flops are forcing tech firms into a procurement holding pattern. Greyhound Flashpoint. Tariff reversals are eroding executive confidence in long-term IT planning. Per the Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 61% of Fortune 1000 CIOs in the U.S. have delayed or restructured procurement due to policy uncertainty. This is no longer about cost, it's about stability. At Greyhound Research, we believe this reflects a governance crisis at the heart of enterprise technology buying. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, tariff volatility has turned routine technology procurement into a geopolitical chess game. CIOs and CFOs now find themselves navigating unpredictable terrain where trade decisions override business cases. What was once a standard upgrade cycle has become a high-risk bet on the consistency of federal trade policy. This disruption is especially severe in industries that operate at scale and require long-term capital allocations: manufacturing, healthcare, logistics. Enterprises are shifting from progressive IT investment strategies to reactive procurement governance. Greyhound Pulse Insights. The Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 study shows that 61% of CIOs across the U.S. Fortune 1000 have either paused or restructured their technology investments as a direct response to tariff uncertainty. Among those, 47% have frozen infrastructure refreshes, while 36% have triggered early renegotiation of long-term cloud and SaaS contracts. The steepest slowdown is among organizations with offshore logistics exposure, particularly retail and supply chain sectors, where cost escalation from even marginal tariff changes destabilizes pre-approved budgets. Greyhound Fieldnotes. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote from a board-level advisory session with a Fortune 100 insurance provider, the CIO pulled back a $15 million data center rollout just days before execution. The legal and risk functions flagged the potential of a mid-project tariff swing that would render imported server equipment prohibitively expensive. The team pivoted to a cloud-first, multi-region deployment model using shorter-term pricing windows. Across other regulated industries, we're observing this shift toward agile, tariff-aware architecture planning. AI, cloud, hardware, and software are playing different games against the tariff clock. Greyhound Flashpoint. Different sectors, different strategies. Hardware is relocating factories. Cloud is lobbying Washington. AI vendors are locking in chip bundles, and software firms are rewriting contracts. Per the Greyhound Sector Pulse 2025, 73% of infrastructure vendors began alternate sourcing initiatives in Q1 2025 itself. At Greyhound Research, we see this as a permanent redistribution of operational risk, not a temporary trade detour. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the tariff response is no longer uniform. It's deeply fragmented by sector. Hardware players are in emergency risk mode, moving production out of China and onboarding backup vendors. Cloud hyperscalers are expanding their regulatory affairs teams to negotiate exemptions. AI vendors, particularly those reliant on proprietary silicon, are bundling compute, models, and credits to create sealed, tariff-insulated offerings. Even software companies, despite being perceived as immune, are embedding trade clauses into licensing frameworks. Each vertical is responding to the unique tariff shock that hits its margins and GTM model. Greyhound Pulse Insights. The Greyhound Sector Pulse 2025 shows that 73% of infrastructure vendors, spanning storage, networking, and compute, initiated alternate sourcing evaluations in the first half of the year. Among cloud providers, 39% increased their lobbying and compliance budgets to address tariff risks, while 58% of AI vendors reported client-side delays linked to uncertainty in silicon pricing. Even among software providers, 29% introduced tariff index clauses in customer contracts, particularly in export-heavy sectors such as cybersecurity and fintech. Greyhound Fieldnotes. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote from a West Coast AI platform strategy offsite, clients are now demanding bundled solutions with hardware, inference models, and compute credits locked into multi-year agreements, protected from future silicon cost volatility. Separately, during a supplier alignment call with a North American cloud provider, we noted that the company had rerouted its GPU integration pipeline from China to Vietnam within 60 days. These changes are no longer tactical. They're operational redesigns based on geopolitical risk scores. CIOs are now engineering tariff resilience, not just budget buffers. Greyhound Flashpoint. The modern CIO isn't just planning for disruption, they're engineering around it. Per the Greyhound Procurement Pulse 2025, 66% of global 2,000 firms now operate formal tariff response task forces and simulation protocols. At Greyhound Research, we view this as the institutionalization of geopolitical agility in IT procurement. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, reactive procurement cycles are being replaced with resilient architectures, both structurally and contractually. CIOs are coordinating with legal, finance, and risk teams to set up tariff-aware governance. Simulation models, vendor requalification, and cross-border SLA revisions are now standard practice in procurement blueprints. For multinational enterprises, these aren't best practices, they're survival imperatives. We're now advising clients to build procurement agility into enterprise architecture design principles, not just into purchasing workflows. Greyhound Pulse Insights. According to the Greyhound Procurement Pulse 2025, 66% of global 2,000 CIOs have established internal task forces focused on tariff risk modeling. 42% have adopted simulation tools, often digital twins, to estimate vendor exposure under changing trade scenarios. Additionally, 57% of enterprises have embedded region-specific sourcing rules in procurement playbooks to minimize over-reliance on any single trade corridor. These numbers show that geopolitical agility is no longer a differentiator, it's table stakes. Greyhound Fieldnotes. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote from a procurement workshop with a Fortune 500 retailer, the CIO demonstrated how ERP-integrated scenario models were being used to dynamically allocate vendor spend by geography. In a separate meeting with a global agritech firm, the CFO presented a strategy that mandates cloud workload distribution based on tariff exposure tiers, forcing vendors into SLA reform. This shift toward algorithmic, tariff-informed decision-making is reshaping what procurement leadership means in 2025. Tariff chaos is becoming a commercial opportunity for global tech vendors. Greyhound Flashpoint. Chinese tech firms are bundling and localizing. Non-Chinese vendors are capitalizing on their neutrality. Per the Greyhound Supplier Sentiment Pulse 2025, 48% of U.S. CIOs now explicitly favor non-Chinese hardware vendors in their upcoming bids. Tariff chaos is no longer just a disruption. It's a commercial opportunity in disguise. Greyhound Standpoint. At Greyhound Research, we believe global tech suppliers are repositioning around U.S. trade volatility. Chinese OEMs are camouflaging their origin and moving up the value chain with managed service bundles. Meanwhile, vendors from Taiwan, Korea, and parts of Europe are using compliance-first messaging to break into U.S. accounts that were previously locked by incumbents. Enterprise buyers, especially in government and defense-adjacent industries, are actively shifting supplier preferences, not purely due to risk, but to preempt future regulatory blowback. Greyhound Pulse Insights. According to the Greyhound Supplier Sentiment Pulse 2025, 48% of U.S.-based CIOs are now prioritizing non-Chinese hardware providers in upcoming RFIs. 31% are actively auditing current vendor portfolios for origin-related exposure. Among public sector CIOs, 61% said they are restructuring sourcing templates to exclude Tier 1 Chinese origin suppliers altogether. This shift is not ideological. It's procedural, driven by procurement mandates and board-level pressure. Greyhound Fieldnote. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote from an infrastructure alignment workshop with a tech contractor, the procurement team recommends that all upcoming storage infrastructure bids must show evidence of U.S. or allied manufacturing provenance. In another client review with an SDN startup, we observe how their neutral geopolitical position helped them close a seven-figure U.S. deal ahead of larger but riskier Chinese rivals. Vendor geography is now just as important as technical superiority. Rapid reshoring sounds heroic until you need a 3nm chip delivered in 6 weeks. Greyhound Flashpoint, reshoring U.S. semiconductor fabs, is politically compelling, but operationally incomplete. Per the Greyhound Semiconductor Pulse 2025, just 18% of CIOs believe U.S. fabs will be AI-ready at scale before 2027. At Greyhound Research, we believe chip supply nationalism risks bottlenecking innovation, if not matched with real infrastructure. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the U.S. effort to reshore chip manufacturing is strategically sound but logistically overestimated. Talent shortages, tooling delays, and environmental clearance issues are pushing timelines out of sync with enterprise demand. Meanwhile, vendors are cutting R&D budgets to finance compliance, slowing innovation in co-packaging and logic design. For enterprises with AI and HPC workloads, this means higher cost per inference and longer time to deploy, just as competitors double down on silicon-based performance advantages. Greyhound Pulse Insight. Per the Greyhound Semiconductor Pulse 2025, only 18% of US-based CIOs trust domestic foundries to meet AI-grade chip requirements before 2027. 64% report continued dependency on fabs in Taiwan and South Korea, especially for 3nm custom logic. In high-velocity industries like automotive, pharma, and algorithmic trading, 79% of respondents said they plan to dual-source chips from both US and Asian vendors over the next 3 years. These numbers highlight the widening performance gap between policy rhetoric and production capacity. Greyhound Fieldnote. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote from a planning session with a top 5 automotive supplier, executives acknowledged that chip supply promises from US fabs would not align with critical model launch deadlines. In a separate case, the CIO of a major OTT platform told us they were forced to scale back real-time recommendation systems due to a lack of high-performance inference chips. In both instances, firms are adopting hybrid acquisition strategies, using US-based pilot lots, but reserving Asian fab capacity for mass production. Analyst in focus, Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CXOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media, including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thofker.com.